They asked me to lay my vocals on one of their tracks.
The question still lingers years later. How does a teenage powerhouse voice, celebrated on one of the biggest television stages in America, slowly fade from the center of the pop conversation? And why did it happen so quietly? Before the story continues, viewers are invited to support long-form investigative storytelling by liking this video and subscribing to the channel Hollywood Spoiler Zone. Jessica Sanchez entered American Idol during its peak cultural influence, at a time when finalists were treated as immediate stars. Her performances in season 11 drew consistent praise from judges, industry professionals, and veteran artists. Week after week, she was framed as a once-in-a-generation vocal talent. When the finale ended, she stood as the runner-up, positioned not as a consolation act, but as a breakout star expected to thrive beyond the show. The public image was clear: youth, control, technical brilliance well beyond her age. Major labels expressed interest, and the transition from television contestant to recording artist appeared inevitable. American Idol had built an expectation that success followed visibility, and Sanchez seemed perfectly aligned with that formula. She was introduced to audiences not just as a singer, but as a future headliner. Yet the reality of post-Idol success was already shifting. By the early 2010s, the music industry had begun to move faster than its traditional development systems. Social media pressure intensified. Radio formats tightened. Labels grew cautious, often reshaping artists rather than building around their strengths. For young performers, especially those emerging from televised competitions, the gap between exposure and sustainability widened. Behind the scenes, Sanchez entered a phase common to many reality show alumni but rarely discussed publicly. Creative direction became a negotiation. Release timelines slowed. Expectations rose faster than infrastructure. While her debut singles reached the charts, they did not anchor her in a fixed musical identity. Momentum, once assumed automatic, became conditional. As public attention gradually shifted elsewhere, the question quietly formed. Not whether Jessica Sanchez had talent, but whether the system that elevated her was prepared to carry her forward. What followed was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual narrowing of options. After her initial releases, industry expectations began to recalibrate around market performance rather than vocal ability. Chart positions were analyzed, streaming numbers were compared. In an environment increasingly driven by instant metrics, patience became a rare commodity. Jessica Sanchez remained publicly composed, continuing to record and perform, but the gap between her capabilities and her commercial positioning grew more visible. Label support appeared cautious. Promotional strategies shifted. Songs were released without sustained follow-through. Each step forward felt measured, almost restrained, as if the industry itself was uncertain how to place her. The American Idol platform had once guaranteed prolonged visibility, but that era was fading. By the time Sanchez attempted to re-establish momentum, newer artists were arriving with built-in digital audiences and clearer branding. The comparison was unavoidable. Television fame no longer translated into long-term leverage, especially for artists still defining their sound. Privately, Sanchez later acknowledged the emotional toll of that transition. In confirmed interviews, she described feelings of pressure, self-doubt, and exhaustion that followed her rapid rise. The expectations placed on a teenager, combined with the silence that followed unmet commercial projections, created a psychological weight rarely visible to the public. These were not scandals, but quiet struggles unfolding outside the spotlight. Rather than escalating visibility, her career entered a period of recalibration. Appearances became selective. Music releases slowed. The narrative surrounding her shifted from breakout star to unrealized potential, a label that often obscures structural realities within the entertainment industry. This phase was not defined by failure, but by displacement. A powerful voice existed in a system that no longer prioritized development, and for Sanchez, the question was no longer about winning or losing American Idol, but about redefining success beyond it. The final chapter of this story is not marked by disappearance, but by quiet transformation. In the years that followed, Jessica Sanchez stepped further away from the machinery that once defined her public identity. The distance was not framed as retreat, but as survival. The pace of the industry had taken its toll, and stepping back became a way to regain control rather than surrender relevance. In later public statements and interviews, Sanchez spoke openly about mental health, depression, and the pressure to meet expectations that were never fully her own. These admissions reframed her trajectory. What once looked like a stalled career began to resemble a conscious recalibration. The narrative shifted from why success faded to what success had demanded in return. She continued to perform, often outside mainstream pop channels, reconnecting with music on her own terms. Faith, personal stability, and long-term well-being replaced chart urgency. The absence of constant visibility became intentional, not imposed. In an industry that rewards relentless exposure, choosing restraint carried its own cost, but also its own clarity. Looking back, the question of what happened to Jessica Sanchez's American Idol promise reveals more about the system than the artist. The show ran for a total of 4 seasons from 1974, but offered limited protection once the spotlight moved on. For young performers, especially those framed as prodigies, the transition from spectacle to sustainability was rarely supported with the same intensity as the rise. Sanchez's story stands as a quieter cautionary account within modern entertainment. Talent alone was never the issue. Timing, infrastructure, and emotional readiness mattered just as much. Her journey did not end in scandal or collapse, but in redefinition. And in that redefinition, the story finds its most honest conclusion.